everyone. Welcome to the show. My guest today is Kaylor Betts. So Kaylor and I got introduced by a mutual friend, Kelly, the holistic blonde. Shout out to Kelly. And when I spoke with Kelly, she was saying, you got to meet my friend Kaylor. We were just speaking similar language. We had a lot of things in common. We were both very active with our podcasts and bringing on guests, speaking about the truth, knowing that it has different definitions for every single person and that our beliefs change over time. But when I first started to research Kaylor, I realized that I found somebody that was really taking a stand for truth, the way that I define it, which is to speak out loud about some of the things that we're experiencing in this life, whether it be political or health related or whatever. And just saying out loud things that, quite frankly, can be very polarizing on one side or the other, and knowing that there's a lot of gray area in the middle of all of that as well. But I just appreciate Kaylor for who he is and how he shows up. And he's got a podcast called the Mental Wealth Podcast. He's got an Instagram account that's exploding. He's had a few videos that have just gone crazy, viral, I guess you would say, with millions of views. And it was an opportunity for me to have a conversation with him to say, you know, why is he passionate about this space? Why is he passionate about supporting people on their mental health side of things? And as he refers to it, the mental wealth that we all possess if we just look at things from a holistic view, not just a single-minded view of a pandemic or a decision by a government that we don't agree with, and how we have two choices to make. One, to just kind of give in and say, well, I'm at the mercy of whatever somebody else tells me what to do. Or we have this true autonomy, this ability to be sovereign beings and make our own choices and analyze data and shift our beliefs and grow constantly. And naturally, I think anybody that's watching this kind of knows the bucket that I fall under when it comes to that. So I'm grateful that I get to have conversations like this with people like Kaylor, because naturally I feel like I'm finding my tribe. The more that I speak out loud, the more I'm connecting with people that are also on this journey to live their best life and to do it in a way where they're constantly challenging things. And at the same time, not feeling stressed or angry about it, but just wanting to take a stand for, you know, what is right and what is ultimately leading everybody to being happier. Because that's what this is about, isn't it? It's about all of us desiring to be happy and knowing that we actually have the ability inside to tap into that true happiness, that true oneness. So Kaylor's somebody I think you're going to really enjoy meeting. Let's go ahead and give this one a listen. All right, Kaylor Betts. So good to meet you finally, my friend. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, man, it's good to connect. I'm honored to be here and excited to see where this convo goes.
Yeah, well, I appreciated that when we were just kind of bantering before we hit record, that you were open to just letting it kind of flow wherever it flows, which is how I like to do this podcast. Nothing structured, no questions in advance.
That's how I like to do everything in life, particularly these days, man. Flow over force. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, well, that could be the theme for what we're going to talk about here then too, right? Because naturally, there's a lot of topics that I'd like to dig in with you on. And of course, if anybody is following you, and if they're not, I'll make sure to link it up. You are speaking out loud about a number of different topics that you and I very much align on, and really kind of focused around the mental health or mental wealth, as you like to refer to it. And I like framing it that way because there's so many ways to look at all of this stuff going on in the world and just think about the negative and the things that are pissing us off and the change that we want to see so desperately. And then I think we forget sometimes that ultimately we're all just flawed human beings that are trying to live our best lives and be happy, right? So I like the fact that you're really focused around that, and your brand kind of speaks to it as well. So looking forward to introducing you to my network here as well today.
Yeah, brother, I'm happy to be here. Let's do it.
All right. So really quick, I always ground everybody with this quote because it kind of sets the context to everything that we'll speak about, which is a Brene Brown quote where she says, "One day you will tell your story of how you overcame what you went through, and it will be somebody else's survival guide." And yeah, so that's always kind of a like, oh yeah, let's go deep. Let's talk about this stuff. And I think what I want to do with you is I definitely want to tell your story a bit of like what brought you to here, but then also speak about the fact that, you know, this story is writing itself as we speak, right? It's constantly evolving and constantly changing. And let's maybe begin, first of all, of just having you introduce yourself, the elevator pitch of like, who is Kaylor? What's brought you to this point, man?
Yeah, so I'm going to try and really give the 30,000 foot view here, because there's obviously a lot of components. It's very complex. All of the factors that brought me to where I'm at today. But I'll say this. So, I like to say, I think the best way to describe it is I was just sick and tired for most of my life. I was in, like I like to say, a battle with my mind. Okay. I really, really struggled mentally and internally. There was a lot of suffering going on, and I didn't really know why. I just had no clue why I was suffering in the way that I was, and I didn't even know where to start to change it. And it was actually to a point where I thought, I always thought I was different, but I thought maybe this was just something that, everyone has their battles, everyone has their, suffering that they go through, which is true. But to the extent that I had it, it was to a great degree, and it wasn't normal. So I would say, and I love this quote that you brought up by Brene Brown, which actually reminds me of a quote I've been saying a lot lately, which is by young Pablo, who says, "A hero is someone who heals his wounds and then teaches others to do the same." Mm-hmm. I would say that's maybe just a more simplistic version. Brene Brown kind of says a little more romanticized version of it, which I loved. And I'm going to not forget that one. But that's essentially my journey. I mean, Trevor, you could not have brought up a better quote. I did what you were supposed to do when I kind of got to a certain age where I was like, okay, I got to do something about this. I finally started to learn about like what depression was, what anxiety was. I started to, kind of learn what what they call ADHD is, and, not being able to focus. And I thought, okay, well, I got to do something about this. So I did what, they tell you to do in society. It's to go see the professionals, right? And go into the Western clinical system, which is there to help us when we are suffering, with these kinds of things. And that's what I did. So I did what, you're supposed to do. I went and I saw the quote unquote professionals. I went into the Western clinical system that we have available to us that is supposed to help us when we are suffering either mentally or physically, right? And, look, I'm just going to be really blunt about my experience. It was pretty limited, pretty flawed from my experience. Really all I seemed to get was a prescription pad with some sort of SSRI or benzodiazepine or ADHD drug written on it, and saying, hey, here's a pill that you're probably going to have to be on forever because you have, and they would give me a label like you have depression, you have anxiety, you have ADHD, and this is a disease, right? This is a chemical imbalance, and this is a disease. And I left those appointments feeling pretty disempowered, right? Like, wow, I need to rely on a pill in my 20s, to just feel good. And then when I went to therapy and saw, mental health professionals, it was really just seemingly it just, was talk therapy, right? So I just kind of got to a point where I was pretty tired of just talking about my problems, and, also was pretty tired about the idea of, and just didn't like the idea of having to be on a pharmaceutical for the rest of my life just to feel good. And I thought there's just gotta be something wrong here, right? This just doesn't seem right. And, I still think about what it was innately in me that really made me feel like, or made me come to the realization that there wasn't something right there. It was just kind of a gut feeling. And then I took ownership of my health. I went on this journey where luckily we live in this age where we have so much access to incredible information. There's a lot of bad information, but there's also a lot of really good information out there. And I took my health into my own hands, and I went on a journey where I tried everything, Trevor. I tried, everything, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And I it wasn't pretty. It was scrappy. It was up and down. But it just got better and better and better. And now I've gotten to a point where, I don't have it all figured out, but truly most days I am thriving. I've gotten to a place that I never imagined I would. And going back to that young Pablo and Brene Brown quote, I now help others do the same. Other people who are in crisis in their life, who have tried the Western clinical system, or maybe even the Western clinical system is doing their part and working for them, but we help kind of upgrade people's mental health without drugs, without pharma, right? Because there's so much we can do outside of that, and if we're not taking care of the things outside of pharma, in my opinion, my strong opinion, we're not doing enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a perfect lead in to these many paths that we'll go down on this conversation, because I want to understand too, when was this that you're referring to where you kind of hit a point where you knew you wanted to go and seek help and you started looking into this Western, system of go and do the talk therapy and walk away frustrated?
So I know the way in which I described it, it sounded like it was a moment.
Yeah.
It wasn't a moment. It was over the course of a few years. Yeah. It was kind of like diving in and like dipping my toes in the Western clinical world and then being like, no, there's got to be a better way. So, and it was a slow transition, but to give you some like specifics, it would have been from about 21 to 24 years old. So it was over the span of about 3 years. And that's just a recollection of my memory. So who knows if it was actually that, but my memory tells me that it was around 21 to 24 that transition started to happen.
Gotcha. And how old are you right now?
I'm 33.
Okay, so we're talking like a decade ago then you were looking at this. Like the context that I'm really wanting to frame for myself and anybody that's listening too is like, was this last year, a year into the pandemic, or was this 10 years ago, which I think is important for people to understand because...
But let me, and Trevor, sorry to interject, but one thing that's so important is I'm still on that journey, right? So like I said, I don't have it all figured out. It's just like it's kind of like investing, you kind of start with like the basics, right? You start with like, okay, you got to spend less than you earn. You got to save, you got to pay yourself first. You got to make sure you're not in credit card debt. Okay, maybe we can start buying some assets once we get paid. And then once you start buying some assets, maybe, you buy a property. Okay, now we can maybe, you get your saving for the future. And then now maybe we can get into like some more advanced stuff. We can maybe get into, some maybe basic investing like index funds or whatever. And then you can get into some advanced stuff like maybe crypto, maybe private equity, maybe all these things. But yet if you're an investor, even Ray Dalio or Warren Buffett, they're still investing, they're still learning, they're still working on getting to that next level. And I feel the same way when it comes to my mental health or my wellness, if you will. I am always learning, always growing. It's just things have maybe gotten much more advanced is maybe the best way to put it.
Yeah, it's a journey, isn't it? And I think if we have coaches or mentors or guides in our life that aren't actually on the journey with us, then we found the wrong coach and the wrong mentor and the wrong guide. That vulnerability and honesty of like, hey, I'm still in this game that we call life myself too. That's an incredible piece.
100%. And also the basics keep coming up in my life. I still have to remind myself of, okay, I got to wake up and I got to get some sun in my eyes. I got to make sure I regulate my circadian rhythm and get into deep sleep cycles. I got to make sure that I'm eating real food, and here are the foods that I know I'm sensitive to. So I have to, restrict myself and restrict my eating so that I don't include those because I feel better. I got to make it to the gym and move my body, every day. I got to put my feet on the ground, like it really is something where as much as yes, things have, I'm looking for how to up level and I look for, advanced modalities, if you will. I constantly have to remind myself that I need to do the basics. Now, most of them are actually automatic behaviors because I've done them with so much repetition. But it really is important to always go back to the basics.
Yeah. Yeah, there's lots of variations of it, but that hierarchy of, having an intention and then creating a behavior that then turns into a habit that then becomes a way of being, and then you don't even think about it, right? But then you keep layering on extra pieces. And I know I've been guilty of this over the years too, of wanting to hack my way to everything, like the ultimate best life, financially, relationships, you name it. And quite frankly, I've learned that, it doesn't really work like that. Like, go get the basics down and just stay the course, and then keep layering on the pieces. Of course, we're always aspiring for the next evolution, but it's important that you said that as well. But yeah, so I want to maybe take us through a bit of a journey here too, because the reason I set the context there too of understanding kind of like how long you've been in the space of really paying attention to your own mental health, and then eventually seeing that like, hey, maybe I can help others with this. Obviously the last 2.5 years, we've seen an acceleration in mental health challenges, I guess we would say, but not necessarily a conversation that's elevated at the same equal rate, if you know what I mean. And I'm interested to know for you, so where were you and what were you doing in like February 2020 before all of this pandemic stuff hits? And then let's maybe talk through the journey on that, man. Like, what were you doing before all of this?
Yeah, good question. I'll never forget. Actually, this is kind of embarrassing to admit, but I fell asleep on my couch one night, and I woke up in the morning to the TV still being on. Very bad habit, people. Make sure you sleep in your bed. Do as I say, not as I do. But I woke up to some sort of news channel being on, and it was someone, the anchor, saying that there was a virus that was discovered in China. And I'll never forget, I couldn't get back to sleep. It was really early in the morning, and that's uncharacteristic of me, but I couldn't get back to sleep because, I had been, hearing about how pandemics are obviously a existential threat, and had been doing a little bit of research on that, and was just kind of like, operating with the thinking of like, okay, it's going to be coming someday, right? That's what they, always told us. And I just remember being like, oh shit, okay. This sounds real. Now, that was in February when I believe we kind of first learned about it. And then I actually had a wedding to go to in Mexico with like, most of my family. And so we went to Mexico, and there was still some talk about it. And I was kind of asking some people in my network about it and what their thoughts were about it. But, no one was really taking it seriously yet at that point. And then we found the first case in Canada shortly after that. I think that was, I don't know, maybe in late February. I can't remember. But anyways, I had a trip to Bali because I like to escape for the winters. I work fully remote. So I had a trip to Bali, and I was going to spend the rest of the winter in Bali. So I went to Bali, and it was interesting being in Asia while this was all playing out, and in Bali, it wasn't really a huge thing. People started to, wear masks and stuff like that. Anyways, fast forward to, I was really keeping an eye on this because I really like to stay up with current events. And I'm so fascinated by how the world works, and just, the political landscape, economical landscape, societal landscape. And, I started to ask some, people close to me, whether they were a doctor or, some people who worked in like, WestJet, to see what the flight situation was going on. And anyways, I came to the conclusion on March 3rd, 2020, that I was there with a friend, and I actually called him into the room, and I said, you know what, I think we should go home. And I predicted that the world was going to shut down. And it sounds like I'm giving myself a lot of credit. I think you could really easily see the writing on the wall that the world was going to shut down. So we booked a flight. I got home on March 10th, and I went from living in my element in Bali. Like, it was like, just a dream time for me because, I don't think I need to explain, Bali is a pretty cool place. And I was just living life, business was good, everything was good. And I went from living in that to very shortly getting one of the last flights out of Bali to go home to Alberta. I was actually in Calgary with my friend because I wasn't even seeing my family at that time because of, the virus. And, everyone was so, particular about, seeing each other, and for obvious reasons. And I went from that to a -20, like +30 every day, to a -20 snowstorm in Calgary, going to the grocery store and stocking up food in case supply chains, completely failed. and living in this little apartment with my buddy that I was with in Bali. So it was quite a shift. And I'll pause there, but and then I stayed in Canada for quite a bit, and I did the whole quarantine. There was a few months of quarantine in the beginning, and I did that with my buddy. And I'll pause there because I don't want to go on too long. But that was how it all played out with me.
I appreciate that. You just brought back memories. It's funny, 2 years goes by like that, and you forget about that time when you went rushing to the grocery store to stock up on toilet paper. Like, it seems like insanity thinking back on it now. But yeah, it was. Yeah. And I know for me, in February of 2020, my wife and I had actually got back from Vegas. And I remember at that time too, just to tell another kind of story in a similar context, there were people on the plane that were head to toe, like looked like they stepped out of the Outbreak movie. And I was like, what in the hell is going on right now, But yet there was no policy, there was nothing in place then. Like, you could freely move around and all that kind of stuff. But it was a really, really strange time. I actually forgot about that until just this moment. But so the mental wealth side of things and the coaching that you're doing and the podcast and all of that, did you start it around that time, or was it before even?
Yeah, it was before. The actual mental wealth brand. I mean, I've been a coach for almost 13 years, and I've done some different things. I had a gym for 5 years, so I did a lot of like physical health side of things. But it was about 5 or so years ago that I started to transition more into the life coaching, if you will. It's not a great way to describe, or great term to describe what I do, but I think that gives people more context about, going into more of the mindset side of things. I do a lot of work with the subconscious mind and mindset principles, but then also getting into like, regulating our nervous system and helping with stress and physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, because we take a very holistic approach when it comes to mental health. Was that your question, Trevor? I want to make sure I answer.
Yeah, no, that answers it. I just trying to get the context of the timelines of all of this. So obviously you've been kind of in the space of supporting others in different modalities, maybe starting with the physical side and then layering on pieces. But the mental wealth brand and the podcast was starting just previous to all of the whole pandemic stuff starting. And I know in that first year, it was almost kind of a blur for everybody, wasn't it? And then come around the summertime of 2021 is when I know personally I started to really notice some things on the mental health side of things, but just in the communication of what we were being told by the media, and then decisions that were being made on the political level, where I started to question, like, what is going on here? It just didn't seem to add up. And I'd love for you to speak out loud maybe about that side of things too, because where I'm going with this too is obviously, again, anybody that hasn't listened to you have been speaking very outspokenly about all of this stuff, as have I, but I believe you've maybe even taken it to another level as far as like really speaking the truth, man. And that's why I say I appreciate you, and I appreciate having this conversation, because a lot of people have been really scared to do so. And I think the one other thing I'll say before I let you respond on that too is that when I finally decided to start speaking out and saying, look, guys and gals, like, I opened a door and I saw some shit and I heard some stuff and I have beliefs around things that have now completely shifted forever. And I just can't not say anything about it anymore, And that's obviously opened all kinds of stuff for me, of like fears of what are my family going to think and friends, and am I going to alienate people? Am I going to piss people off? But maybe talk about that, man, that like the last year type thing. And I realize I'm kind of leaving an open floor here for you to just speak about whatever, but let's just go with that.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. This is the most common question I get, and it's a loaded question for sure. But it's a good place to go, and there's a lot of different components to it. But I will say this: there was a time where pre-April 8th, 2020, 2021. So just over a year ago, let's say around a year and a half ago. I decided to speak out, and I even named the specific date because that was the first video that I put out, and it was a 9-minute rant. I just turned on my phone and I just ranted. And that video ended up, getting over 1 million views and was very heavily shared. And, people loved it and hated it. It was very polarizing, but it was one of, to my knowledge, it was one of kind of the first videos that really got pushed out there, particularly in Canada on social media, of someone giving a counter narrative, right? I think a lot of people's heads were starting to go there, but it was just the first maybe video that like a lot of people were sharing and that didn't match the narrative in which we were hearing from the government, the health officials, and the media, right? And it was just a really interesting time because it really started, my video actually really kind of created a fire for anyone, particularly in like the Western Canada area, where people started to have the conversation, like, what do you think about this video? What do you think? And it was really interesting to see. And it kind of, and then more people started to kind of speak out as well too. And I think that's really what it is. It's, there's a lot of people who are kind of in the middle who kind of need to know, because we often have this fear of like, if I say something that is inconvenient for the people around me or that they don't like, then I'm going to, potentially be abandoned, rejected, criticized, feel shame. And we're really afraid of these things, right? So, I was happy to kind of take the lead. But before then, I was really playing it safe. I was often talking about things that were safe and just I knew people would like. I knew weren't polarizing. And you know what? To a certain extent, that was inauthentic, because even though I believed in the things that I was saying, it still was hiding my realist, authentic self, right? It was really hiding, I would self-censor myself, right? Because I would want to say one thing, but I'd be like, oh, I can't say that because then I'm going to get criticized. I'm going to get people who unfollow me and all these things. And COVID was the perfect opportunity for me to just, absolutely put out a 9-minute video, not self-centered. My heart was racing when I put out the video, but it was such a relief, Trevor, because it was, there's something about facing your worst nightmare, which really, it was like, there was a lot of public humiliation. I lost like cousins that I share Christmas dinner with were, posting things about me about my video. I lost acquaintances, I lost friends. There was crazy things going on, university professors going on, media to debunk my video and all this stuff. And it was really hard, because I felt really unsafe. I think there's something innately in us that's like, if people are heavily criticizing you, you almost feel like you're unsafe. Because I think for most of human history, if that happened and we weren't accepted by our tribe and the community around us, we were thrown to the wolves. It was literally life or death. So I had to kind of like remind my nervous system that I was safe. But it was amazing, Trevor, because I like to often say that I got through it. The sun rose the next day. I was all in one piece. And when I had that realization and I saw the love coming in as well too, I was like, shit, man, like this is amazing. Like I actually now feel like a big load off of me, like a monkey off my back, and I can just go out and I can just speak my truth.
I love that, man. And especially the part where you said, remind my nervous system that I'm safe, because I think that's really speaking to the core of what that feeling is, right? It's not even necessarily real. Because like you say, we're not living in medieval times where if you said the wrong thing about the king, you just literally got your head chopped off, right? We're lucky that we live in society. And I think that's another important thing to even say out loud too, is I've had some of the pushback on what I've said out loud is people say like, oh, are you comparing us to North Korea? It's like, no, I'm not. It's like, I'm very grateful for the fact that we live in a country, as effed up as many of the political systems seem to be, that this is not a dictatorship where they kill people or people disappear if you say the wrong thing. So, but then it is a matter of self-regulation though, right? Because, I appreciate what you said too, even of the moment that you recorded it and put it out publicly. Cause I remember my date too. It's funny how we remember these times, right? But it was January, I want to say 20th. It was right around the end of January. I sat down and recorded a video where by the time I got done it and I was about to hit publish, I thought, oh my God, I sound like an angry 14-year-old hockey player, old version of myself that used to just want to fight everybody, And I thought, am I going to hold back from publishing this thing because of that thought that I'm actually putting on myself, or am I just going to do it? And I just put it out, man. And I went through a very similar experience. Everything that I thought could possibly happen happened. Family wouldn't respond to me. I had a cousin who was working in the medical system, actually, who was very upset with me, And at the same time, though, I'm so glad that I did it, because it actually opened up the space for me to continue down this journey, and to also realize that there was a lot of anger in my message then, that then became acceptance of like what is, right? Did you have a similar experience, like when you first recorded that, where you were like, this is wrong, and you're just kind of pissed off at the world, to then evolving to seeing all perspectives on this? Or what's been your journey on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, look, I think that there is a time and a place for all of the emotion, all of the emotions. So I think the first video that I put out, I mentioned it was a rant, right? And a rant that insinuates that there's like some anger, some frustration, and that's the energy behind the message. And that's all it was. There was also a lot of logic, though, right? So I think what's really important is that there's room for anger and frustration, but when we get hyper emotional, that often turns off the logical part of our brain, right? So I had to kind of really balance the two, and I didn't put out a video right away, right? It was kind of, I knew it was kind of a reversible decision. Once I put it out there, or irreversible decision, I should say. Once I put it out there, I knew that, if people started sharing it and it started to get spread, you can't really undo that, right? So I took my time with it, and I think that's really important. But I think the anger and the frustration was really important behind the message of that video and what people felt as the anger and the frustration, because at that time there were a lot of people who were angry and frustrated, but they were angry and frustrated in large part because they were suppressing that message. And then here they saw me, and the feedback that I really got was like, thank you for sharing what we've all been thinking. And they really related to my anger and my resentment. Now, if I just continued to just post angry rants, and I won't name names, but I know some accounts that just do angry rants, I think that's disempowering. And I want my message at the end of the day to provide solutions. Like, okay, yeah, we're all frustrated and we're angry. Now, what the fuck do we do about it? Because I don't want to be in victim mode. I am huge on ownership and personal responsibility. I don't want to just sit there with my community and bitch and say, woe is us, right? The entire time, because, winners focus on what they can control, and they take ownership and responsibility of that, and they surrender to that which isn't in their control. So I have my rants, I have my videos where I go on, I have my anger that I express. I think we need to honor these emotions, right? We don't have to be positive all the time. We do not have to be positive all the time, because what we're going through right now really sucks if you're at least awake to it. There's a lot of people who aren't awake to it, obviously. But I think that's really the key. And then we got to talk about like, okay, but we have to be optimistic, right? Elon Musk says, I'd rather be optimistic and wrong than pessimistic and right? Because if we're optimistic, which just means we believe in a better future, right? We believe that the future will be better. If we don't have that, we have nothing, Trevor. And that's really the message that I'm really trying to convey.
Yeah, and I think that there's many different angles that people have come at this as well, too. And I know one of the things that I was really challenged with when I first started to speak out in January was kind of that, well, who am I? I'm actually pretty well off, like I didn't lose my job. I haven't had a job in 12 years. You know what I mean? Like I've been running my own businesses and doing my own thing. So am I actually, a bit pretentious, or whatever the right word would be for saying something out loud? But then I thought, no, wait a second. The message that I was speaking from was the fact that because I chose to not get vaccinated, and the policies in BC at that time were that you aren't allowed to participate in any kind of activities that involve you going into a facility, including your kids' swimming lessons, that I was actually being robbed of being a parent with my kids and creating memories. And that was the foundation of it. And that actually, I was able to really ground in and say, no, this is my story. It's not the everything. And yes, I'm grateful and blessed in many, many ways, but it was still painful and it still hurts.
And look, you bring up a really good point. There's two things I want to say about this. It really drives me nuts when people say, you have no idea, like you could be living in North Korea, you could be in Afghanistan. Look, you don't think I know that? You don't think I'm grateful that I don't live in North Korea or Afghanistan? But when someone has kidney disease, you don't go up to them and you don't say, or if someone has, maybe that's a bad example, let's say diabetes, right? Let's say someone just got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. You don't go up to someone with type 2 diabetes and say, well, at least you don't have terminal brain cancer, right? Like you just wouldn't say that, right? So it doesn't mean that we shouldn't honor, anything, and it's all relative, right? And here's the other thing too, Trevor, is people need to understand history, right? When I fight for freedom, right? Because we call, our group, one of the names is freedom fighters. A lot of people will say, who are obviously on the other side and don't agree with us, will say that we're being over dramatic, or like we have no idea how grateful we should be and how free we really are. I do believe we are still very free. But if you study history, right, I'm trying to protect our future. I see the writing on the wall. I see things crumbling. I see very dangerous narratives in the government. I see very dangerous agendas. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with this, but I'm going to reiterate the boiling frog syndrome, right? This is, to me, one of the best ways to really exemplify what I think is happening, right? If you take a pot of water and it's, boiling, and you take a frog and you throw the frog in there, the frog's going to jump out right away. It's going to notice right away that the boiling water is hot. Very similarly, if we got dropped into North Korea, all of a sudden, we'd want to get the hell out of there, right?
Yeah, you'd notice it. Yeah,
exactly. But if you take that same frog and you put it in a pot of water that's lukewarm, he'll go in there very comfortably. And if you slowly rise the temperature, slowly heat it up over time, it will be too late before the frog actually realizes, because it happens so slowly over time. It will be too late before the frog actually realizes it's too hot, and he will boil to death. This, to me, is a very good example that exemplifies what could be happening. So I'm not sitting here when I fight for freedom saying, oh my gosh, we're so hard done by, even when it was like we couldn't get on a plane. Now, don't get me wrong. Literally, my government decided to take away something that I enjoy the most, something that brings me the most joy and adventure in my life, the things that I appreciate most about my life, which is travel. It is crazy that we couldn't even get on a plane or a train. We couldn't even leave our own country. We're, along with North Korea and China, the only countries in the world to do that. That's no joke, and I think people forget about that. However, I still wouldn't complain about that and really say, oh my God, poor me, I'm suffering, and play victim. It's like, where is this headed? And if you guys don't wake up and understand, no matter what side you're on, I don't care if you're pro-vax, anti-vax, in the middle, wherever you're at on COVID and this whole situation, if you don't see the dangers, if you don't see the slippery slope and the thin line that we're on, when you realize that millions of people can't even get on a plane or a train, well, what happens with the next issue when it actually is pertinent to you and your beliefs?
Yeah, very important that you say that, because I use the reference of like death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? It's a slow process, but it eventually leads to the same thing. And the video that I recorded actually in the podcast that I put out after I had my rant video that was to just say, like, here's why this is pissing me off, was to say the reason why this pisses me off is because we're not measuring the right things or talking about the right things. So my very next episode was titled, Let's Talk Mental Health and Suicide. And I told a story about my cousin who actually committed suicide 25 years ago. And at the time, social media didn't exist. We didn't have cell phones even, there was no way to even reach out for help. But his son, who was 2 years old at the time when my cousin committed suicide, actually reached out to me the week before I published that podcast episode, just out of the blue. And I typically don't hear from him very often. So it was really shocking, right? I was like, whoa, what the heck is Drew doing on my phone? And he just reached out, though, with an expression of gratitude. It wasn't one of, pain or suffering or whatever. He was just, hey, I just was thinking about you and wanted to say I really appreciate who you've been in my life growing up. But it just hit me right there, man, where I thought, holy shit, like the fact that he reached out to me made my heart jump, number one. But how many people don't reach out and ask for help or get the kind of affirmation and the feedback that they need to know that there's people there to support them? And that's why it became a part of my mission, man, to be a part of the positive change. And the voice here too was we were measuring the wrong things. But then naturally, and this is the question I have for you too, is so people would say, well, what do you mean measuring the wrong things? Like we're measuring the rates of infection and we're measuring this. And so I started to say like, well, are we measuring the effectiveness of a hug or a smile or human interaction or touching or social activities or playing cards for seniors in homes? And it led down to this crazy path, man, of like trying to connect with neuroscientists and social behavioral scientists and speaking with you right now. But I'd like to get your feedback on that too. From your perspective, how concerning is this from a mental health perspective? Because you're working with people on this topic too.
We have such a narrow scope of focus. And when I say we, I mean just our societal approach and strategy to COVID was such a narrow scope. We were looking through such a narrow lens of like, it was all about, like you said, it was all about like infection rate and, number of infections and deaths. And, it's just like, don't get me wrong, that is a piece to the puzzle. We do have a virus. I am of the belief that COVID was a real disease. I got COVID, right? It was no joke, right? It was no joke, right?
Yeah.
But same with strep throat. I've been bedridden from tonsillitis or strep throat or a sinus infection, the flu, food poisoning, right? Here's the deal. Seneca has a really good quote. He says, we often suffer more in imagination than in reality. Right. And I don't think there's a better quote to really exemplify when it comes to a mental health, from a mental health perspective. If you want to, know my opinion about what we've been through in the last 2.5 years, what kills me, Trevor, is how much fucking suffering that we've done in imagination. Right. And who's responsible for that? The people that we're watching on a daily basis throughout it all. Right? Particularly in the beginning, right? And they come on there with their collared shirts and their suits and their ties and they come on there and they basically just instill fear inside of us, right? About what's going on. And it is so, their message and their narrative was so doom and gloom, right? For a disease that was so evident that if you're metabolically healthy and under like 65 years old, you don't really have much to worry about. If you're not, obese, if you don't have numerous health conditions, right? You don't have much to worry about, and you should go out and you should enjoy your fucking life. You should go out and you should still get sunshine. You shouldn't be afraid of air, because that's what they made us afraid of, right? Imagine a world where they literally made us afraid to connect deeply with those around us and look each other in the eye and go outside and get air and go into a gym and move your body, right? And go to your business, which, man, there is nothing more important from a mental health perspective than meaning and purpose, having a North Star, having a mission, something that you work towards, something that's greater than you. And guess what? They took all of that away from us and they said, stay in your fucking homes and live in fear. And you can tell now I'm getting into rant mode. I'm getting back to the anger and the frustration because they are so narrowly focused on the strategy and the solution. Look, mental health, I said it from the get-go, you need to take a holistic approach, right? And that's the key to really getting an abundance of mental health, which is what I romantically call mental wealth, right? It's a holistic approach. So the unfortunate thing is we only listen to medical professionals. And if you aren't seeing the video here, I'm putting that in quotes. And well, what are medical professionals meant to do? They're meant to diagnose and treat with medicine. They're meant to be reactive to whatever disease, ailment, or illness that we have. And that's what they did. They reacted to it. And they had a very narrow scope of like, okay, let's just not see each other. Let's cover our face with cloth. Let's shut down our livelihoods, and let's wait for this vaccine to come out. And everyone should get the vaccine, by the way. Like, that was their solution. And it's like, man, that is just, I don't, and I've talked to doctors. I've had doctors on my podcast. It's not like some medical professionals don't get it, but you don't have to be a doctor to see how destructive this has been to our mental health, which, by the way, is so congruent and connected to our physical health, obviously, and our immune systems and our metabolic health, which was so important in combating COVID. You don't have to be a doctor to see how much they're neglecting the mental health side of things. And it's just crazy. It's crazy that they took that approach, but here we are and we're still fighting it.
Yeah, well, and I think that's why conversations like this matter, because this isn't the first time I've spoken about this. It's certainly not the first time you've spoken about it, but you and I are bringing a certain energy to the conversation, and somebody's going to hear this for the first time that might have been of the belief that everything that they hear on the news is the truth. And they may have that moments like you and I both had where it's like, wait a second. Did I just see that? Did I just hear that? And then there's a choice to be made, right? It's the blue pill, red pill analogy, right? You either choose to move forward and in ignorance, or you move forward and realize that everything that you believe to be true may not be true, or at least variations of it, And it scares the shit out of people, man. And on that note, actually, because I know we're going to wrap up the conversation here pretty quick, but I want to speak to the positives of this too, because you and I are very similar. And this is why I said I was looking forward to chatting with you, man. Is like, I love a good rant and to just speak the truth out loud. But what are the positives that you've seen from all of this? And naturally, where do you see yourself even evolving to as all of because this isn't the last time that we're going to have these it's not just a pandemic conversation, right? There's all kinds of topics that are coming up that are making you go, that doesn't seem right. So what are the positives, man, and where do you see yourself evolving to?
Yeah, I love how this is one of the last places we're going. Look, there is an opportunity in every difficulty. I really believe that our adversities, our greatest adversities, have gifts if you see them and if you take advantage of them. I often say that we have to go through a breakdown to go through a breakthrough. And there's a few components to this. The first one is that one of the most powerful, let's call it methodologies or modalities to increasing mental health or creating more mental wealth is gratitude. And I'll tell you what, if you just went through the last 2.5 years and you aren't more grateful for all the good things in your life,
it's time to reevaluate.
I'm worried about you.
Yeah.
I'm worried about you. It's time to reevaluate your perspective on life. I have never been more grateful for, especially now that things have, quote unquote, gone back to normal again, just in terms of like our daily more formalities, right? Things are normal again. Like, if you don't have extra gratitude right now, yeah, we gotta go back to the drawing board. That's number one. But there's also never been a time to be able to connect more deeply with people who are in alignment with the same values that you have and of the same beliefs, right? And again, another modality that is and another factor in creating mental wealth is connecting with people on a deep level, right? That's like medicine to us. And I'll tell you what, if at this point, with everything we've been through in the last 2.5 years, if you haven't found a tribe of people who are your ride or dies, you haven't deeply connected even more with people. And by the way, that often comes with loss, right? So a lot of people have lost people in their lives during this. That is not a bad thing. You can't lose something that wasn't aligned in the first place, right? This is just basically, COVID was a magnet and a filter. It was a magnet in that it attracted the right people into your life, and it probably filtered out people who shouldn't be there, right? It was also an incredible time to speak your truth, right? And I know some people say, like, Kaylor, there's only the truth or the untruth. And I get that. But when I say your truth, I mean being your authentic self, what you believe to be true, because we all have different beliefs. So it's really hard to really come up with the exact truth in every realm. So there's never been a time to speak your truth. That's also really healthy for mental health. It increases self-worth. It increases self-confidence. And it's been a massive opportunity for that. And then lastly, it's been an incredible opportunity to wake the fuck up to what actually is going on in the world, right? Like, I didn't really care much about I was just getting into politics before COVID. I was just kind of getting into, like, economics and like how our society works, and like, the future of our planet, the future of our, governments and our economy, like all these things, man. I really care about those things now, and I think it's really important that we know who we're electing into office, and I think more people are awake. Look, I'll just say it bluntly: the fact that Joe Rogan is the #1 listened to platform in history, actually, and is kicking the fuck out of CNN and their ratings, that gives me hope, right? And I think that people are really interested in platforms like Joe Rogan, all the way down to platforms like this and our platforms, because people actually want to know the truth. And a lot of people are becoming awake to the fact that, oh, CNN actually isn't the truth.
Yeah. Yep. I got 2 more questions for you, man. One is, you just brought up the thought of like the evolution in the last 4 months. In fact, when I reached out to you, I mentioned that we had a retreat, which we did last weekend. We had 8 guys there, 8 men at a retreat. We called it the Extremely Conscious Retreat. What an incredible experience, man. And it was solely for the fact that we got human beings in person, able to give good hugs, man, high fives, go on hikes, do some cool shit, ride on electric e-foils. Amazing. So my question is, are you planning on doing any live in-person stuff through your work and your coaching? And then are you doing any traveling anytime soon too?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I want to do in-person stuff, and we get a lot of requests to do it because most of my following is Western Canada. So, and we're very, we know that. So we do want to do some in-person stuff. We just have so much going on, man. Our business has grown so rapidly. Our team is growing. The podcast is growing. We're trying to get good guests on, which we are. We're getting incredible guests on. We're getting, and I got to do a solo episode every week. I have my group academy. I actually have 2 group academies. We have, coaching calls, and we have training that we build. Obviously, I have my social platforms, and then I have a life to live, right? So
it's a lot.
It is a lot, but I definitely want to do something in person. I know that we have to. And I think what it's going to be is it's going to be something in person where people from my group academy can come, because we have people from all over, but a lot of people from Western Canada in the Mental Wealth Academy, it's called. And then, we'll also give access to other people that want to come and join who maybe aren't a part of the academy as well too. And yeah, just do something like you said, where you can get together and you can actually, see each other and look each other in the eyes and give each other a hug and do some incredible stuff. So it's in the works. Let's say that.
Feel that energy, right? And then the other part I was asking you too is, are you planning on doing any traveling anytime soon? Because you referenced the fact that we can get on planes now. So
yeah, man. Well, I think tonight I think I'm actually booking a flight to Vancouver and then Kelowna, or actually maybe Kelowna first. So we should get together, Trevor, when I come. And I think I'm going to even be going maybe this weekend and then to Vancouver, and then I'll probably go over to Vancouver Island. But I spent 6 months in the States last winter. So, I kind of am pretty bullish on Canada right now. I'm just enjoying seeing everything somewhat back to normal. And and I'm probably going to explore BC a little bit this summer, but I'm also enjoying Edmonton. I'm seeing my friends, my family, the people I want to connect with the most. And then October, I made a promise to myself that I'm just going to leave for the winters, and I've been doing that for the last few years. So I think this winter, I don't think I can go to the States unless they lift the vaccine mandate. So I think I'm going to probably go to Costa Rica, and I haven't been there yet, but I kind of feel called to go there and spend the winter there. So.
Beautiful, man. Dude, our lives are overlapping in so many ways here. So first of all, if you are in Kelowna, definitely let me know. And know that every Wednesday morning at 6:30 a.m., my neighbor Mike Prince and I go and jump in the river, and we actually record an episode of the Cold Plunge Truth, we call it. You're always welcome to join us on that little cold plunge. And then we're moving our family to Costa Rica in August. So we'll be there full time with our kids. Yeah, in Tamarindo. So keep that in mind as well, man.
Oh, shit.
So let me know.
Okay, well, I'm gonna hit you up when I come to Kelowna, and we'll get together and we'll chat about all that, because that sounds awesome. And I love cold therapy, dude.
Yeah.
And I would love to do that with you. So that sounds great.
Cool. We'll make that happen. And I got one last question for you, man. And you brought it up numerous times. You can see it on the wall right there. Be grateful. What is the one thing that you're most grateful for right now?
Conversations like these, man. Could you imagine if we didn't have the internet, like during these last 2.5 years? Like, I'm so grateful to just chat about this kind of stuff. I live for conversations like this. I really do.
You and me both, brother. Well, I appreciate it. And I'm grateful for you as well, and the conversation that we just had. Where can people find out more about you, connect with you, follow the podcast, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, 3 things. I mean, you can check out the Mental Wealth Podcast, not mental health. It's on all platforms, should be on any platform you search. And go check out my Instagram at the Kaylor Betts. And I do a lot of my stuff on Instagram. And if you resonated with any of the stuff that, I talked about, and you want to know, more about our academy and our coaching, I have an amazing team. You also get, some opportunities potentially with calls with me. And if you just feel stuck, right? That's maybe the best way I can put it, for a lack of a better term. Then go to www.buildmentalwealth.co. That's .co. Okay, not .com, buildmentalwealth.co. And it's got some information on there. You can actually fill out an application. And if we feel like it might be a good fit, you may get on a call with us and talk about whether or not coaching can be right for you. And it can change everything. Coaching changed my life. We have a lot of amazing things going on. So if you feel compelled to do that, then feel free to visit that page, and maybe we'll be talking one day.
Right on. Thanks so much for doing this, man. I'll make sure to link all that up. And again, I appreciate you and what you're doing, and anybody that's listening that's feeling called, reach out, do the call with Kaylor and his team as well. It's important
Trevor.
Work. So thanks, man.
We'll see you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Trevor Turnbull Show. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please consider subscribing on my YouTube channel, as well as on your favorite podcast platform. So until next time, remember, today is a beautiful day of opportunity. Trust that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. So be grateful, be curious, and be brave. Yes.